I had always found comfort in the quiet language of plants. Their needs were simple: sunlight, water, time. Unlike people. My days as a gardener passed in a gentle rhythm, pruning roses, trimming hedges, listening to the rustle of leaves. The estate was vast and secluded, tucked at the edge of the city, a place where secrets could rest beneath the soil. Then he arrived. Ayan, my employer's nephew. He came from the city, all polished shoes and soft cologne, carrying the weightless arrogance of someone who had never had to pull weeds or scrape dirt from under their nails. The first time I saw him, he stood at the garden's edge, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the blooms as if he were searching for something. He was beautiful in the way twilight is, soft, distant, almost unreal. At first, I thought he was just curious. Rich boys often wandered into the garden out of boredom, only to disappear the next day. But Ayan returned, every morning, sometimes alone, sometimes with a book he never opened. He didn't speak much, just watched me work, asked the occasional question. "What's that flower called?" Or, "Why do you water at this hour?" But the way he looked at me, it wasn't idle interest. It was intentional, like he was trying to read something in me I didn't know I'd written. I began to notice the little things, how his gaze lingered when I bent to cut a rose, how he smiled at my surprise when he brought me a cold drink without being asked, how he always found a reason to stay a few minutes longer, even when the sun was high and the heat stung. And I, fool that I was, began to wait for him. I'd trim the roses slower, hoping he'd appear behind me. I'd rake the leaves near the bench where he'd like to sit. When he was late, my chest felt strangely empty. It wasn't just attention. It was something deeper, a tenderness I hadn't expected. For someone like me, love had always been a silent thing, unnamed, unshared. Yet with Ayan, it felt like spring again. He never touched me, never said anything too forward, but there was a warmth in his presence that felt dangerously close to intimacy. We shared glances that lasted a beat too long, silences that said more than words. And each day, I found myself tangled more tightly in the invisible thread he wove between us. Still, a voice inside me whispered caution. He was from another world. Mine built from soil, his from silver. But that voice grew quieter each time. He smiled. By the end of that first week, I wasn't just tending flowers. I was nurturing something far more fragile, something blooming inside me. And like all delicate things, it begged to be protected. The days blurred into each other, warm sunlight stretching across the garden, soft winds carrying Ayan's familiar scent of citrus and cedar. He came more often now, never in a rush, always with that same thoughtful gaze. What began as passing conversation turned into long, winding talks under the shade of the fig tree. He'd ask questions that caught me off guard, about my childhood, my dreams, if I ever felt lonely. I answered cautiously at first, unsure of his intentions, but his curiosity felt genuine. He listened like no one ever had, as though my words were seeds he wanted to plant in his memory. One afternoon, he brought 2 cups of tea, still steaming. "You work too hard," he said, handing one to me. "Even the flowers need rest." His voice was low, smooth, almost teasing, and I didn't know what to say. We sat in silence, sipping slowly, the kind of quiet that felt full rather than empty. That day, his knee brushed mine, just briefly, maybe accidentally, but neither of us moved. I started noticing the way his presence changed the air around me. When he was near, time seemed to slow. His compliments were soft but deliberate. "You know, the garden looks better when you're in it," he said once, his voice carrying something heavier than casual charm. I tried to brush it off, to tell myself I was reading too much into things, but a warmth spread through me every time he spoke like that. Then came the evening he shared something personal. The sun was melting into the horizon, casting gold across his face. He looked at the ground when he spoke. "I don't really fit in here," he admitted. "They expect me to be someone I'm not. But when I'm here, I can breathe." His vulnerability touched something inside me. I wanted to protect that part of him, to offer him the kind of quiet safety I found in the soil and petals. Without thinking, I told him, "You can always be yourself here." He looked up then, eyes steady on mine, and said, "That's why I keep coming back." The line between friendship and something more began to blur, a dance neither of us acknowledged, but both performed effortlessly. I knew this wasn't ordinary. This wasn't routine kindness or mere boredom. I saw it in the way his fingers lingered when he handed me tools, in the soft laughter that curled at the edge of his lips when I made a shy joke. But still, I wondered, what was this really? I told myself I didn't need answers. I only needed his presence, his glances, the subtle electricity that passed between us when no one else was watching. And yet, even in the beauty of it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fragile was growing here. Something the world might not allow to bloom. The shift was subtle at first. Ayan began arriving late, sometimes not at all. On days he did come, he seemed distracted, his smile a little thinner, his words rushed as though he were somewhere else in his mind. I told myself he was just busy, perhaps dealing with family matters, but doubt, like a creeping vine, began to take root. One afternoon, I was trimming the hedges near the fountain when I heard his voice from the other side of the wall. I paused, expecting him to appear, but his tone was different, louder, laced with amusement. He was on a call. I shouldn't have listened, but I couldn't help myself. His words struck like thorns. "Yeah, he's harmless," he said, laughing lightly. "Sweet guy. Quiet. It's kind of entertaining, really. I swear he looks at me like I'm the sun." A pause. "No, of course not. He's the gardener. Just something to pass the time while I'm stuck here." My breath caught. The shears slipped from my hand, landing silently on the grass. I stood frozen, the air suddenly too heavy to breathe. In that moment, every soft smile, every lingering touch, every look that once made my heart flutter twisted into something cruel and calculated. I felt stripped, exposed, like a flower blooming only to be crushed underfoot. I didn't confront him. When he came to the garden the next day, smiling as though nothing had changed, I nodded politely, keeping my hands busy and my eyes averted. If he noticed my coldness, he didn't mention it. Instead, he talked about how he might be leaving soon, how the city was calling him back. I simply nodded again, every word he spoke digging deeper into the wound. He kept returning, but the spell had broken. I saw it all now, the performance behind the kindness, the rehearsed charm in his compliments. He had never needed me. He had only needed a mirror to admire his own reflection, and I, foolish and eager, had offered him one. In private, I unraveled. The garden, once my sanctuary, now held shadows of humiliation. I stopped tending the roses first. Their petals browned and fell away, unnoticed. The bench beneath the fig tree grew dust. I couldn't bear to sit there anymore. He still smiled at me, still offered tea, but the warmth in my chest had turned to ash. I responded with silence, with absence, with distance. He didn't try to cross. The worst part wasn't his betrayal. It was that for a brief moment, I had believed I was seen, that I mattered, that I could be loved. I began to understand. Then some hearts don't break loudly. They wither quietly, like leaves in the dry wind, until there's nothing left to hold. The day he left, the garden was quiet. No footsteps on the gravel path, no soft greetings or questions about roses. Just the breeze stirring the dry petals, and the low hum of bees moving from flower to flower. Ayan was gone. Not a goodbye. not even a glance. The same way he had slipped into my world, he vanished from it, effortlessly. For a while, I tried to pretend it hadn't mattered. I threw myself into work, pruning overgrown vines, planting new rows of marigolds and jasmine. The soil, at least, was honest. It gave back what I put in. But the emptiness lingered. Not just from his absence, but from the parts of me I'd revealed, the small truths I'd entrusted to him, now left exposed like roots torn from the ground. One evening, my employer approached me as I watered the azaleas. He mentioned Ayan's return to the city, casually, as if it were a minor update. "He's always been restless," he said. "Doesn't stay anywhere for long." I nodded, hiding the ache behind a neutral expression. Of course he didn't stay. He never meant to. But even in his absence, the ghost of him lingered in corners of the garden. The bench where we had laughed, the tea stains on the old wooden table, the fig tree whose leaves whispered stories only I could hear. I thought, the memories would haunt me, but over time, they became softer, less like wounds, more like warnings. It took weeks for the heaviness to lift. I stopped hoping for his return. I stopped replaying our conversations, looking for meaning. Instead, I started reclaiming myself. The garden flourished again, slowly, steadily. I planted new flowers in the space we used to sit, letting beauty replace the silence he left behind. One morning a new visitor came, a young man from the neighboring estate, curious about roses. He asked questions, genuine ones, and listened with quiet fascination. I saw something familiar in his wonder, but it wasn't wrapped in charm or veiled motives, just honest interest. And I realized then that not every glance holds a promise, and not every smile is a lie. Some people simply pass through, leaving us bruised. Others arrive to remind us that we're still whole. I never spoke of Ayan to anyone, not because I was ashamed, but because that chapter had run its course. It had taught me something only pain could teach, that love without respect is a shadow of the real thing, and sometimes the person we yearn for is simply a lesson wrapped in longing. Now when I walk through the garden, I do so with open eyes. I still believe in beauty, in connection, in the quiet language between souls. But I no longer wait for someone to see me. I have learned to see myself.